Let me start with just an introduction, and then I'll kick it over to my colleague Dylan to introduce himself, and then we'll jump into the training, and I'll walk you through kind of the items that we'll be sharing with you today. So my name is Chris Coles. I'm the Assistant Commissioner at the Utah System of Higher Education for Access and College and High School. And so anything really like early college, concurrent enrollment, UCAC program, this direct admissions initiative, all of those things kind of run through my shop. And I've been at the commissioner's office for about 3 years. Previous to that, I worked at Utah Valley University for about 13 years, almost 10 of those as the director of admissions at UVU. So anyway, that's a little bit about my background. I'll describe a little bit more context of this project here in just a second. But let me turn it over to Dylan and allow him to introduce himself.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Very excited to be with you all today to talk about Admit Utah. Many of you may know me as the FAFSA coordinator for our state. My role has now shifted, and I'm now the college and high school coordinator. So, and you probably are aware of that as well with any emails that have been sent out. But I'm excited to be here and be able to work on a lot of these efforts surrounding concurrent enrollment and admissions. And so, welcome today. And yeah, turn it back to you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Dylan. Dylan really, his knowledge with FAFSA and all things related to financial aid world have been actually very, very helpful in his new role. And as we show you this site today and walk you through how it works, we also anticipate that a lot of Dylan's knowledge and FAFSA related content will be a future enhancement of this site. And so we look forward to that, but I'm thankful to have Dylan on the team and looking forward to working with him and with all of you. All right, let me share my screen and we'll just kind of dive right in. You are probably familiar with the Admit Utah website. If not, then that's the purpose for our training today, to just help you become a little bit more familiar. But before I get started, I wanted to take a couple of steps back and just give you a little bit of historical context of how we got to this point. So my previous work, as I mentioned, in enrollment management and admissions, was focused on, is in the transition that I made to the commissioner's office, was initially focused on looking at ways that we could simplify the admissions process and identifying obstacles that we could remove that would ultimately, just make it easier for students to navigate that admissions cycle. And once we started that, we identified this project really early on as a way that we might remove numerous obstacles standing in students' way of accessing higher education. And accompanied with that, we were also working with the board, identifying strategic initiatives at the state level that were focused on access and broadening that to obtain more high school graduates after graduation and within 3 years of high school graduation to attend a post-secondary institution in Utah. And so we track that access metric, and we are focused on increasing that over time. For the past number of years, we have seen some decline in that access area, and that was ultimately the purpose for this project and initiative, was to align with the board's strategic direction, but then also ultimately just bringing higher ed closer to students. So as we started working through this in the past about a year, as a new board was then onboarded to the Utah System of Higher Ed, our initiative and focus changed to try and get further down this application and admissions funnel with students. And, Admit Utah then was born. So in the past number of months, we have really been working on, with all of our institutions, in trying to increase the number of applications overall for students in Utah. And evidence around the country has shown that when applications go up, enrollment also goes up. An example of this has been in the state of Georgia, where they've launched a similar initiative. And not only have they seen applications increase, they've also seen their enrollment in their different institutions around the state also increase. So we're excited by those results. And this is not a new initiative in terms of in the nation. There are a lot of different systems and colleges and universities that do things like this. But in terms of the state of Utah, there's never been one centralized location for students to find as easy of access to all of the 16 public colleges and universities in the state of Utah. So with this launch, we really are transforming the way students access higher ed and also removing barriers at the same time. And so you'll remember back at the beginning of this year, in January of 2024, the Utah Board of Higher Education voted to eliminate application fees for all state institutions. And that includes specifically for resident high school students, but then also concurrent enrollment and transfer students in the state going between institutions in Utah, not transfer from a previous state to Utah, but students transferring between institutions in the state. And so with that, that was really phase one. We removed that obstacle. We've seen an increase of applications across the state at our institutions this year, and that's also translated into enrollments. And then this is really phase two, which is giving students a tool to see where they're guaranteed admission in an effort, again, to increase applications and enrollment. And then phase three, I will discuss a little bit later at the end of this presentation and talk to you about where we're going with our next steps. So, all right, now with all of that, let me start walking you through this website. Admit Utah is a really unique tool. And primarily, we want students to interact with the site and see which institutions are guaranteeing their admission. However, we provided some easily, accessible information for students right up front in terms of kind of just understanding a little bit of the landscape of higher ed in Utah. One of those examples is here, where they can see the different types of institutions that exist here. And then also learn a little bit more about them. A lot of the feedback that we've received during this work, third-party surveys that have been administered by the Cicero Group, and then also Envision Utah, and then also some internal sampling that we've done of students, has indicated that there's just a lot of confusion about what types of institutions actually exist here in Utah, and truly what are students' options at those institutions. So we try and spell that out here, talk about four-year universities, talk about our community colleges and regional universities, and then we also highlight our technical colleges as well. And the unique thing here, this isn't news to all of you, you already know this, there's a lot of overlap with our institutions in the state. So you'll see four-year universities here, but then you'll also see in this community colleges and regional universities that some of those same institutions are listed. And that's because there's institutional types here in the state, and there's then institutional roles. And many of our institutions have shared roles, especially those that are regional universities. And you can get a four-year degree and graduate degrees from those institutions, but you can also start at the associate level and focus on two-year degrees. And so we're trying to walk this line of educating students about their options and then doing justice by our institutions in the roles that they play in their local communities as well. There's a little bit of a myth busting section here, just like some quick questions and quick responses. These are things that we hear regularly from students. And so we're just trying to address those up front with students in a fun, playful way. And then lastly here, there's just an FAQ section. Now this FAQ section will continue to grow as this site is used and as we encounter more questions from students. But also, I'll talk about this a little bit later, one of the enhancements that we'll be adding to the site here in 6 months or so is a large chat bot that will be embedded here and primarily have a lot of information about FAFSA and financial aid, as well as then continuing to build out a knowledge base for students regarding options at institutions around the state related to program or other affordability things, and just building out a unique tool that students can receive responses in real time. So, but what I really want to focus with you today is on the actual tool that exists within the site. And the best way of describing this is just a layer of filters that exist throughout the site that, based on students' responses, we then display back to them institutions that might be a best fit for them. So this initial phase is based off of GPA. And we have received some feedback from folks of saying, well, maybe students are scared of entering their GPA and don't want to do that because they think it's too low. Honestly, that's really the beauty of this tool, because many of our institutions in Utah are open admission. Their requirements for admission are not selective. And so there's a wide range of GPAs of students that are going to those institutions. And ultimately, we want to communicate to students that you do have options, that you are college material. And there might be institutions that you never imagined you could attend, and they get a better understanding of that here. So there are some GPA bands built into the site, and those GPA bands correspond with institutions that then guarantee a student's admission. And so for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to bump this all the way up so that we receive all of the institutions on our list, and we'll continue forward. There is a dynamic list of high schools, and I'll just randomly type one here. This list, we are discovering that there are a few omissions on there. We are going back to that list and adding more institutions, in particular charter schools, every single day. The list is very robust though, and so if you don't find your institution, please let me know. This next then phase, and all of these responses go much faster than what I'm explaining. It really takes about 30 seconds to go through these first 3 questions, but giving a little bit more context, this is taking slightly more time. As I start entering in my email, students then agree to share their information, which is their first name, first or last, whatever they put here, their email, their GPA, and the high school that they are graduating from. And based off of those things, then we generate an automated email back to the student, and we let them know all of the institutions that they're qualified to for guaranteed admission. And that way they have something that's living in their inbox and that they can refer back to. There's clickable links in there about program information, tuition rates, as well as application links to each of the institutions that they qualify for. And it's just a great way to get info back to students really quickly. In addition, based on service region, we'll also be sharing this information if students click the I agree with institutions, higher ed institutions in their area. And that way those institutions can then do some outreach to them and continue that process of recruiting or providing information during that college selection process. So for the sake of this, I'm going to skip that. You can see now in real time, based off of then my GPA, here are all of the institutions that are guaranteeing my admission. And I want to call something out because we do get a few comments from folks on this. It says 16 here at the top. If I were to scroll through here and actually count these up, there are 17, and we are very aware of that. We wanted to address this because some people feel like maybe the programming is off on the site. Utah State Eastern and then Utah State Logan are showing up on the site. We consider the same institution, even though different locations. And so that's the reason for the 16 and then the 17 tiles. So just an FYI there. But students then from this page can start filtering through institutions by now more of that role, the role that they serve or the degrees that they offer. So bachelor's degrees, by associate degrees, and then by technical certificates. And again, you'll see that some of these institutions stay as you click through, but some of them don't, especially as you transition from bachelor's degree institutions to tech certificates. There's a lot of change on the site there. But it's just a way that students can see, okay, here are all of my options. And here are institutions that quite literally will guarantee their admission at that GPA range. If then they're saying, well, maybe this is too many institutions for me to like really think about, students can refine their options, and we ask them some brief questions about interest. And so for the sake of this, I'm going to respond particular way that's going to focus more on the associate's degrees or community colleges, regional universities in the state of Utah. So as I get to this question right now, I'm going to select all of them, and I'll change that in just a second and show you how the website responds. So if I answered those questions and then said for all of the regions in the state of Utah, the website is now saying it looks like a two-year community college might be your best fit. And then here are the institutions that you qualify to apply to and are guaranteed admission. If then I say, well, I'm actually not interested in every location, I'm actually more interested in just the northern part of the state, then I can uncheck those. And this will now only provide institutions that offer those two-year community college associate level degrees based off of that GPA range as well. And so for this example, Weber State is showing up. Students can go back in here and they can change this as often as they would like. They can answer totally differently. And they're just, seemingly never ending options that will be displayed to the students based off of their responses. And this way, in real time, students can now see I have a lot of different options. I'm not limited to just ones in my community. I'm not limited to ones that I thought my GPA was a match to, but turns out that there's a lot more that that I qualify for. And so that way, we're already seeing results of communicating to students the power of educational options here within the state. Now, again, I can retake the quiz. I can start the entire thing over. And if I do that, I won't take the time here because I want to open it up for some questions here in a couple of minutes. But, if that GPA range slides back and forth, changes, then these institutions will change as well. Just so you know, the vast majority of institutions still in the state of Utah accept students with a wide range of GPA. And while we do have selective institutions here in this state, there are still typically 14 options for students, regardless of the GPA that they have, even if that's extremely low. And it's worth noting here as well that while I'll save that maybe for the end, talking about, I don't know, even some of the impact that we've already seen and an example of what I'm trying to illustrate here. But for the sake of our conversation, I want to stop this presentation, at least with the website. And I want to jump you over to then, okay, how are we communicating this out to our stakeholders within the state? And then also, where are we going with this project in the future? And so this is a presentation that we've been sharing with all of our stakeholder groups, which you are a part today. And I want to mention this just so that you know we're attacking this from a lot of different angles to try and just flood the community with information about Admit Utah, especially right now during Utah College Application Week, which is currently ongoing and lasts, I think, through the first 2 weeks of November, and then we'll wrap up. But even for subsequent application cycles, around the end of the year, beginning of the year for application or scholarship deadlines. And then towards the end of the academic year, we typically see a lot of students applying. This will continue to be a resource for them, no matter when they come to the site. But we have already met with a bunch of your colleagues last week and did the same presentation with them. We have met with all of the UCAC advisors throughout the state. We've presented to the PTA leadership at the state level, who will be sending out communication to over 9,000 participating parents in the PTA Association. We're meeting with community organizations, charter school leadership. We have a presentation coming up with superintendents, as well as CTE directors, and all of our higher education institutions, their admissions counselors and recruiters have been trained on the site as well. So with all of that information, we're also hoping that people will share out some marketing assets that you should have already received last week in an email from Bethany Marker. And those assets are, here's an example of those on this slide, but they're for digital boards within your high school. Therefore, copying quarter sheet flyers for students that could be handed out in their CCRs, therefore social media, and there's just a wide range of marketing assets that you are welcome to use, and that our institutional partners, higher education institutional partners are also utilizing in their visits with students, and even will be utilizing in the springtime for higher education days as well. So if you have any questions about utilizing those, please let me know. But there are a lot of different assets, and we're just encouraging folks to share them with students in any way that makes sense for you. So then here's where we're headed with the site. Immediately, while we've launched this year and we're guaranteeing students admission, that's the current function of the site, we ultimately hope to get to a point where we're actually completing the admissions process as students interact with the site. What that might look like then is those institutional tiles still pop up on their results page, but instead of applying now, whatever language we end up using, students will admit in real time. By clicking those buttons, we'll do an electronic transfer of student information, as well as electronic transcript data, over to an institution of higher education. They'll receive that real time, and they'll be admitted real time. And so now we've taken the application process to just a couple of clicks of buttons, instead of students actually having to fill out applications, which they are still required to do this year. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to do that, but that is our ultimate goal, is to move through the admissions process altogether. In the meantime, then in the spring, we're going to focus on some enhancements to the site with Spanish translation, the chatbot integration that I mentioned to you, some more sophisticated filtering of institutions based off of zip code, and then also looking at filtering based off of program offerings by institution, as well as tying in some workforce components that will help students see, based off of a program of interest, the workforce opportunities and kind of economic value of that program and job that's available to them here in their local communities. And so really trying to enhance the tool of saying, hey, this isn't just, oh, wow, where can I go to college? But let's tie together some things about workforce and potential earnings in the future that we think will have a lot of power for students. And then next fall will be, is our projected launch for a full direct admissions initiative, where students will fully be admitted real time as they click on the links contained in those institutional tiles. And that would bring me then to, here's how we're going to do that. And I won't bore you with the details, other than saying we already have an existing partnership between USHE data and research team, and then also the USBE data team. And we have an existing grant. It's called an SLDS grant. It's a federal grant that has been in place for about a year now. And the purpose of that grant is to bring together data sharing between USBE and USHE, which is being called this UDRC Bridge database. Utilizing Bridge and existing APIs that we already have in place, for example, with the concurrent enrollment participation form, students' data would then be transferred real time from USBE to us, and then that electronic transcript data as well. And this is how we will accomplish our direct admissions focus. So that's probably the level of detail that I'll get in with that. More details to come here. This is a heavy lift in a year's time, but a lot of different folks are working on this, and we anticipate that launch next fall. So with that, I've talked about these phase 3 goals in other ways and in other words as I talk about this process moving forward, but suffice it to say, we are interested in just removing all barriers for students in accessing higher education, from costs to accessibility to ease of navigation. All of those things are what we're focused on for our Utah students. So with that, I want to open it up to questions. I know Dylan has been responding to questions in the chat as they've been received, but I'll stop sharing here. If needed to, I can jump back into the presentation or the website, but I wanted to open it up if there are questions out there that can help clear anything up or respond to things that you've been hearing or things that maybe I didn't explain here in the last few minutes. So with that, I'll be quiet and let anybody come off mic and answer or ask any questions that they have.
I do want to hit a couple of the questions that have been sitting in the chat. First, you mentioned that initiatives like this that you talked about earlier on enrollment, increase enrollment. Is there data showing that certificates and degrees are also increasing, or do we only know that enrollments are increasing for our degree granting?
Yeah, really good question. So I would say right now, a lot of the literature that you'll read out there in educational journals or that's published online with local or national outlets, outcome data related to direct admissions is not yet available. And I think it will be in coming years as we see those students graduating, we'll be able to do those comparisons. So right now, a lot of that information is not available simply because this work in large part has existed for the past couple of years, I would say. I think as we get to that 4-year mark, we'll be able to start seeing what the outcomes are related to direct admissions. So good question.
Another one, in the past, UVU has always told me that their holistic approach to admissions, they can't tell me if a student would be admitted or not until they review the actual application. In your example, the U of U came up as an institution that this example student would be admitted to. Can you tell me what the admissions criteria is for the U? I'd love to share that with the student.
Yeah, good question. So all the freshman standard for guaranteed admission at the University of Utah is a 3.5. Now, with that said, and we're working with the University of Utah on this, is describing to students that even if they don't have a 3.5 GPA, they are still welcome to apply to the University of Utah. And based off of their holistic admissions review, a student might be admitted to the University of Utah with, below a 3.5 GPA. It's just at that level, that's where they guarantee it. So, and that's for freshman students. This is different for transfer students, but the tool that we've created is primarily for in-state high school students. At Utah State, they will guarantee admission to all of their campuses at a 2.0 to 2.79 GPA range. They guarantee admission. Now, that might mean that students who are interested in going to Logan might have to enroll in certain courses, but it doesn't diminish their guaranteed admissions. They can still go to that institution, but they might be required to take certain courses in their first semester before they can continue on to a wider range of course offerings, but they are still guaranteed admission there. So the 3.5 is the highest kind of threshold for guaranteed admission, but we want students to know if you don't have a 3.5, don't not consider the University of Utah as an option for you. Still apply. If that's an institution that they've always wanted to attend, we would encourage them to apply. But as far as the site works and the bands of guaranteeing students admission, that's the range that we're at.
Another question, and I know you've covered this already, but it might be good to have some repetition for those that may have missed it. Are we working towards a common application that would allow students to complete one application and apply to multiple institutions at once?
Yeah, good question. So that was our initial focus with direct admissions, is going towards kind of the one app approach. And now that we've focused more on this direct admissions piece, we're really talking about doing away with the application altogether and doing those electronic data transfers real time. So what that looks like in the future precisely is to be determined. But as we transfer in students' data, we believe that we can actually satisfy a lot of the application fields that currently exist out there and not have to have students, fill anything out. Whether that will require like a login or something like that, we'll need to see. But we really are now focused more on getting away from applications altogether and just making this as easy as possible for students to click buttons and be admitted. Looks like there's a couple more here. Will they ever have private universities on this site? For the foreseeable future, probably not. I mean, as the Utah system of higher education, there are 16 public colleges and universities that fall within the system. And that's our primary obligation and focus as far as the board is concerned. In the future, for the benefit of students, we may include private institutions, but right now our primary focus is on the public colleges and universities.
And then there's that last question from Amy. So basically, if a student has a 3.5, there is no longer a holistic admissions review for the U of U. I'm looking for clarity there.
Yeah, correct. So the University of Utah has also implemented a, I don't know, I'll call it the slim down application version. I believe they're calling it the Beehive app. As students then go through this site, they're encouraging students to use that Beehive app, which is different than the common application that they also use. And so, yes, students are guaranteed admission. I won't say that there's not a holistic view. I think that's their approach to all admission there, but students would be guaranteed admission, and they have a route to a more simplified application than other students nationally would be filling out. So I hope that answers your question.
And then I had one more that came in, thought might be good to bring up. Where does this leave Keys to Success? Many schools and students use them for UConn college admissions.
Yeah, good question. For right now, we still have a great partnership with Keys to Success. I would say primarily that tool in the past has been utilized as a scholarship tool. And while we did implement probably a year and a half ago, the admissions checklist, it was work that was, I think, catered towards this approach ultimately of just helping students navigate the college admission process. They can still utilize that site. I will say we are putting more of a heavy emphasis on Admit Utah. But for financial information, specifically scholarships and the rewards that the Keys to Success program offers to students, we'd still encourage them to utilize that. In the future, we'll continue to look at how these two website and mobile app kind of work in tandem together. But for the time being, there is a little bit of a separation of what this tool is and what that tool is. And we would recommend students to continue to use both.
That's all from the chat. If anybody else wants to
Okay,
come off mute.
Chris, I have
great.
a question. This is
Yeah, please.
Becky Ostadlane from New Ames. You had said that the transcripts are going to come directly from the state to the institution. Our kids obviously participate in the early college program, so they're taking a lot of classes already at the university. Those classes don't get uploaded into Utrex. So when you
Yeah.
send the transcript, there's quite a few classes that are missing. Has there been a conversation of how that's going to orchestrate for the kids who are already participating in college classes?
Yeah, really great question, Becky. Your colleagues also attended this training last week, and I don't remember their name, but they brought that up specifically. And so we have added that question to our list, and it will absolutely be a part of the conversation moving forward. So I don't have a great response for you now, other than we are aware of it and it will be discussed as we go ahead.
Well, that will be great. I'll pass on to my other colleagues who are going to
Yeah.
bring up the same question.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously,
please have them ask. That's fine.
yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Other questions from anyone? And if there's not, if you don't mind me asking you a question, this is something that I kind of pushed pause on earlier. We're also seeking feedback from all of you in your interactions with students. If you're seeing any type of a lift with this tool just in the short amount of time that it's been out. We've already been receiving some analytics and some data from our vendor partner who helped develop this. We're seeing a huge lift online as far as users accessing the site, but those anecdotal pieces, more of the narrative type qualitative data is really what we're looking for in terms of this changing students' behavior or mind around attending college. So does anybody have any experiences with this in the last couple of weeks that they'd like to share something? Okay. I'll just assume that there's good things happening out there and people are a little shy to share. So let me share one that we heard from last week. And I don't remember the institution that this was at, but um, high school counselor came off mute in our training last week and said, I was just meeting with a student this morning in their CCR. The student had a 1.6 GPA and they did not think that they could go to college and they were not planning on it based off of the initial meeting. The counselor said, I just heard about this new tool, Admit Utah, pulled it up, walked through the student, put in the 1.6 GPA, and 14 of 16 institutions were returned. And all of a sudden, the student saw that they had options to go to college, was immediately excited, and changed their entire outlook on what their educational options were moving forward. And for me, that type of a, I don't know, piece of information was a little bit emotional and even just, it was so exciting to see that in a short amount of time, students are changing the way that they think about their educational goals, that they now see, oh, I have a lot of options. And that's exactly what this tool is created for. So if you have any of those experiences with students, we would love to hear about it. I'm going to throw my email in the chat, and I would love you to email me and let me know. I just had a similar experience with a student, or I'm hearing this from parents, I'm hearing this from my colleagues. We want to be able to share that and just continue the positive momentum that we've already gained in the past couple of weeks with this tool, and really help students see that their college material, they have options, and there are resources and people out there to help them with that. So I just dropped my email in there. Please feel free to reach out to me. We'd love to hear from you. And also, if you see things as has been happening, we're also seeing occasionally there are some edits, or somebody put in the chat there was an institution that we're missing. We're making changes all the time, every day. to the site to make it a useful tool. And so I commit to you, if you feel like, hey, something's not working right, or you might want to consider this, I'll also take that feedback, because we want to continue to make enhancements and changes to the site, make sure that it's a useful tool for students. Okay. Okay, well, we're kind of right up against time. Dylan and I are happy to stay here if there are others who would like to chat or ask other questions. But that really concludes our presentation and training. So you can start jumping off if you would like. If you want to stay, we'd love to hear from you. But thank you so much for attending today. We appreciate you.